Our journey begins in Boston. Organized crime is on the rise, and Frank Costello has made a name for himself. He takes what he wants, and on some EDP shit, he flirts with what I hope isn't a minor.
You get your period yet, Carmen?
And he asks if she's got any cupcakes in the back. Regardless, he takes a liking to this child, Colin Sullivan. He bribes young Colin with groceries and comic books to try and recruit this child to be one of his soldiers. He teaches him a valuable lesson about morality. You can either grow up to become a criminal or a cop. But when you're facing a loaded weapon, what's the difference? So with the wisdom of a great role model, Colin grows up to become a cop. He trained vigorously and eventually made it to the ranks of a state police detective. And if you thought this man turned his life around after Costello's words of wisdom, well, you'd be wrong. Lucky for Costello, his young Padawan is now in the state police department. Now let me draw your attention to William Costigan Jr., a man dealing with his mother's recent death and with a family history drenched in organized crime.
That's right.
He also trained hard, but fell short when it came to exams. I'm sure once he circled C 3 times in a row, he started to question his knowledge. Uncle Ben and Sergeant Dignam break the news to him that he can never be a state police officer because he's stupid. But William is like,
are you sure about that?
They find more use for him being an undercover informant. And because he wants a brighter future for himself and has nothing left to lose, he agrees. And so his journey begins as an undercover officer of the law. And to not raise any suspicions about his police training, he has to go to jail and pretend like he's Walter White, going from good guy to bad guy.
You're goddamn right.
Once he's free from his shackles, he goes to visit his cousin and convinces him he's not a cop, so that he can dip his toes into the criminal underworld. Back with Colin, the criminals he has to investigate are Frank Costello and his crew. Now obviously, he's still working for Costello, so he's mainly going to pretend like he's trying to capture him because he's a rat. Just like William, his cousin is talking to Costello's men, Mr. Frenchie and whoever this is. He's trying to convince him that William is no longer a cop. And I guess if you're trying to convince others that you're not from Weenie Hut Jr., you gotta break a few skulls when someone disrespects you for drinking cranberry juice instead of hard liquor. But Mr. French disapproves of this behavior because only he can beat people up for no reason. Back at the bureau, all these feds are told that Costello stole a bunch of CPUs. These CPUs can be used for cruise missiles, so instead of building a gaming PC, Costello plans on selling these processors to other criminals so they can use them like kill streaks. It's also worth mentioning that Sergeant Dickhead doesn't tell any of these guys who his informant is because only he and Uncle Ben know, so as far as the feds are concerned, just feed them shit and keep him in the dark. Like William, Colin is also pretending to be something he is not. He plays the role of a state police detective, and when Costello calls for a favor, you best believe Colin is gonna get on his knees and get the job done. In this case, two feds are following Costello, not being very subtle, so he calls Colin to confirm which cars they are, so that Mr. French can leave these pigs in the dust. He also meets and flirts with this lady from the Conjuring movies and gets her number. She's basically a therapist for cops, so that'll be important later. He takes her out on a fancy date and acts like an entitled prick because they didn't have duck l'orange, which is basically a French version of orange chicken from Panda Express. Anyway, back with Silly Willy, he's also on a date at the ER. He got into a fight with these Italian guys because they were harassing this business owner for protection money. And just like Batman, he used his fist to deliver justice, which came at the cost of a broken hand. But that didn't stop William from beating on criminals. This inevitably got him in trouble with Costello because the guys William beat up were from another crime organization and they want revenge. Costello can protect Will.i.am, but first, he has to check if he's still a cop. So they search him for wires and drugs. And just to be safe, they check his broken hand as well. So once he passes the shakedown, Costello takes care of Will.i.am's problem and gets rid of the two guys William beat up. And he frames it all on this guy named Jimmy Pappas, thanks to Santa's little helper in the state police department. After framing the competition, Costello sits down and talks to William about finding a use for him, kinda like how Uncle Ben and Sergeant Dickhead did in the beginning. The only difference is, Costello is holding a decapitated hand, like a scary maniac. So this scares Will.i.am into removing his hidden wire and tossing it out the window. In the same way, I tossed out all my hopes and dreams of becoming a chef. But hey, at least Colin and William got promoted. Because if you work hard enough and roll with the punches life throws at you, maybe even lie on your resume about who you really are, you'll get far enough to get that sweet promotion at work. William's promotion came with a cool flip phone, and Colin's promotion came with his own little suicide squad of people he trusts because someone in the department is a rat. Later, this guy gets arrested and the feds know he works for Costello. So they're trying to get a warrant to search his house, but the only problem is they don't know where he lives. So Colin does some illegal shit and pretends to be his lawyer to try and get his address. So he goes in and tells this guy to call his mother and tell her he's not gonna make it home for dinner, which is code for warning these guys about the cops. So it looks like he's helping the cops get a home address to raid the place, but in reality, this sneaky little rat warned these guys about the cops. While Colin is very competent in being a rat for Costello, one area he does lack heavily is down in the basement because his little red rocket is having a hard time taking off. His girlfriend tries being nice by telling him it's okay, shit happens, but he cries on the inside and leaves the chat. Back with William, his life and mental health are rapidly declining because, unlike Colin, William is balls deep undercover. He has to witness some immoral actions happen right in front of him, and with all the pent-up rage, anxiety, and sad feelings, Will.i.am visits his therapist, which is none other than Colin's girlfriend. He wants medication to ease his sad pain, but she says no, so he goes off on her like a diss track. She gets pissed but still decides to help William and writes him a prescription for his sorrows. So then he invites her out for some coffee, like nothing ever happened. Anyway, Colin and his team are called to a last-minute operation thanks to Uncle Ben's informant. Costello is about to sell all those CPUs he stole, so Colin calls his dad and tells him he's not going to make it home for dinner. So now Costello knows about the cops. And then Colin finds out that the feds are monitoring their phones. He quickly texts Costello through his pocket, being all sneaky. So during this deal, the person in charge of setting up the cameras fucked up his job because there was a major blind spot allowing these criminals to do their business deals. Costello makes the deal with this angry dude and they end up leaving on a boat instead of the cars they came in, so the feds fail their mission and don't make any arrests. William gets paranoid right after because of the rat inside the feds, so I guess to calm down, he goes and has coffee with Colin's girlfriend. Speaking of, they now live together, which is cool, but not really because Costello calls and tells Conjuring Lady to get the fuck off the phone. So he tells Colin he thinks there's a rat in his crew, and he gets mad at Colin because he thinks he has his thumbs up his ass too. But Colin tells him to calm the fuck down and then demands to give him information on the people he was with last night. But Costello doesn't like Colin's demanding tone because he's not the big boss, so he apologizes like a pussy. Anyway, it turns out Costello did an old switcheroo with the CPUs he sold because the criminals who bought them were arrested with nothing but disappointment in their briefcase. Fucking genius. Back with William, after interrogating this tweaker, he finds out the real reason why Costello hasn't been arrested yet. It's because he's a protected FBI informant, which makes him a rat too. So he goes to Uncle Ben's house and tells him all about it, and then after that, he goes to this warehouse because Costello wants everyone to write down all their personal information, and they put it all inside this envelope, and this moron misspells citizens, so Silly Willy corrects him. After that, he leaves and visits Costello's girlfriend because he doesn't want to be in a room full of sausages. He would rather go and clap some cheeks. I'm sure she was okay with this because she must have been tired of Colin's flimsy Slim Jim. Speaking of Colin, his boss wants him to investigate people inside the police department to see who the rat is, so he reassigns him to investigate his brothers and sisters of the law, which will just make him look like an absolute dick, and not a hard one either. But anyway, William's new mission is to follow Costello to see who the police department's rat is, so Costello meets Colin at an adult theater, and William is sitting in the back looking at the rat and the rat talking to each other like a bunch of rats. Once Costello hands Colin the envelope, they both go their separate ways, and now William is trying to hunt this rat down, and after almost losing him, this idiot's phone goes off. And now Colin is spooked. This moron had his phone silent in the theater, so why did his two brain cells think it would be a smart idea to take it off silent? Why? Uncle Ben texts him to make the arrest, and Colin is over here ready to stab the next motherfucker that gets close to him, which he does, but it was some random dude. William tries going after him, but Colin disappears into the shadows, so neither one of them ever saw each other's faces. Anyway, Costello talks to William about his rat infestation, and it's bothering him because it's not easy committing federal crimes when you have a rat nibbling away at your plans. And he thinks it's pretty suspicious that the new guy didn't stick around like everyone else did when they wrote down their information. So William is shitting bricks trying to convince Costello that he isn't the rat. Maybe it's one of the other guys. He might have saved himself this time, but Costello still doesn't trust him. Back with Detective Limpdick, nobody in this office likes him because his new assignment is to find the rat among these loyal officers of the law. So Uncle Ben gives him some advice to find this rat. He's like, with great power comes great responsibility.
Really?
No, he tells him, follow Costello, you'll find his rat. So he goes back to his cuck chair and whips out the envelope with everyone's information on it and runs background checks. So while he's doing that, Willie is waiting for Costello to do another mission, but when he comes out from slaughtering a pig or something, he tells Willie to hit the road because he doesn't need him anymore. So Willie leaves the bar and gets called out.
You're a cop.
But only because this guy tells this dude that anyone who ignores you is a cop. William knows Costello is trying to feed him a load of disinformation to see if he's the rat, but it doesn't work, so Costello is convinced that he is not the rat. So Willie calls Uncle Ben to meet up, but back with Colin, he uses Uncle Ben's advice against him. So instead of following Costello, he has his loyal police soldiers follow Uncle Ben to lead them to his rat. He eventually gets followed into this abandoned building where he meets up with William, and Colin tells Costello he's found the rat. One of the guys calls William to tell him that they found the rat and they're about to go bust a cap in him. So he tries escaping with Uncle Ben, but somehow these guys got there in less than a minute. William escapes through the fire escape and Uncle Ben stays back to distract these guys or whatever, but just like in the Amazing Spider-Man, he dies in front of William. And just like Peter, the death of Uncle Ben is on his hands. These guys come down and yell at William for being late, and just as they're about to leave, Colin's team disobeyed his orders to stand down and open fire on these guys. This guy gets shot and this cop gets shot. These criminals leave and Colin's team yells at him for backup, but instead of helping them out, he turns off his radio and sits down in the dark, acting like nothing ever happened. But his out of sight, out of mind strategy didn't work, because Sergeant Dickhead and the new captain in charge are wondering why this limp noodle had Uncle Ben followed in the first place. He tells them that that's none of their business, so Sergeant Dickhead tries to set him straight.
I'm joking! Stop!
Sergeant Dickhead has to take a leave of absence, but he would rather quit than to work for these morons. Back with William, he's getting his ear chewed out because he was nowhere to be found when they called him earlier. So after making up a dirty little lie, the dude who got shot calls him over, and he said that earlier when he called him, he gave him the wrong address to the location, but oddly enough, William still showed up at the right address. So he's like, oh shit. But this man is like, tell me why I didn't tell nobody. But before William can even ask, he goes to sleep forever. What a relief. But anyway, William goes to see Conjuring Lady, but she tells him they can't be friends anymore, so no more benefits, I guess. So he goes home and tries to find the solution to all of his problems at the bottom of a bottle. But to his surprise, his trap phone rings and it's Uncle Ben.
Psych!
It's Colin. While he was looking through Uncle Ben's things, he found his phone and thought to himself, well, it's not like he's gonna use it anymore, and called the last number. William answers, but neither of them say a word. So William hangs up, starts freaking out, and packs his things. But after a while, he calls back, and they're like, it's you. Thank God you're alright. Where's Sergeant Dickhead? He's not here right now. He's very upset with what happened. Hey, listen, why don't you just come in and we'll have ourselves a chat, How's that sound? Well, that didn't work. So Colin goes through Uncle Ben's things one more time and discovers for himself that Costello is very well indeed an FBI informant. Later, it turns out that this dude right here was also an undercover rat, so Costello proceeds back to business. Colin calls to tell him he's got a tail, so he tells Colin to get rid of them, but instead he tells him to just stay home, but he doesn't want to because he's out with the boys. So after being yelled at to get rid of the tail, he's got no choice but to listen to the big boss, sort of. He tells his chief to call off the tail because he knows where Costello is going thanks to Uncle Ben's informant. So the officers pull back and Colin receives a location from William. Costello and his crew go and pick up some pillows, which he tastes to see if these are good pillows. A group of cops roll up about to catch him with his pants down. William says he's got to take a shit and disappears. So once Costello and his men are leaving, the cops pull up on him and he tries to escape. And his men open fire at the cops, so now it's an all-out Nerf battle between both teams. But unfortunately for Costello's team, they all got massacred. Frenchie was shot and Costello went his separate way, which was a smart idea because this dude just ended up crashing his car. Costello calls Colin, but he just appears from the shadows, and Colin confronts him about Costello being the FBI informant. He doesn't deny it. He just tells Colin to stop being a child and grow up. And all Colin cares about is whether or not Costello ever gave him up to the FBI. Costello tells him no because he was like
a son to you?
Then he hits him where it hurts when he says, all that murdering and fucking, and no sons. He tries shooting Colin, but just like his penis, all he shot was blanks. After this, everyone in the office is congratulating him on his success, and also William is waiting for Colin in his office. He just wants to be done with this whole police thing and get his identity back. So Colin tells him that's not a problem. All they need is his password to get into his account. So William gives it to him, and he's like, ah shit, my computer isn't working. Let me just use another one, I'll be right back. So he goes to another room to open his file, but then William notices the envelope that Costello gave to the FBI rat. So he sneaks out and runs away. So when Colin comes back, William isn't there, and he noticed that the envelope was moved. So he goes back to William's file and deletes it from the police records. William goes to see Conjuring Lady and gives her an envelope. He tells her to open it in 2 weeks if something were to happen to him. Then she goes home and tells Colin that she's pregnant, probably not his. And then while he hops in the shower, she goes through the mail and finds a package from William. So she opens it and it's William's mixtape. She pops it in and plays it, and it's a phone recording of Costello and Colin mingling with each other. So when Colin comes out, she sees this filthy rat as a liar and locks herself in a room. He calls the number on the case and Willie tells him that Costello recorded everything and gave the tapes to his lawyer. So in case something were to happen to him, Willie would receive those tapes. He tells him to meet him where Uncle Ben died, but as soon as he gets to the top, William sneaks up on him and tells him to
Hey!
He pistol whips him and arrests him for being a rat, but Colin tells him he deleted his file, so good luck with that. So then he pounds his face in so he can shut up, and then this dude walks through the door and is confused by what's going on, but William called him because he trusts him and he knows William. So after convincing him that this is the rat and he has evidence, they make their way downstairs to the elevator. Reality starts to set in for Colin because he knows his life is over. So once the doors open, William gets shot by this rat. Turns out Costello had another informant who joined at the same time as Colin, and Costello was going to sell them out eventually. This dude makes it down and looks at dead Willie and then gets obliterated. Another one bites the dust. So he tells Colin, it's just you and me now. But Colin has other plans. He can't leave any loose ends. So the cops show up and he basically tells them that he was the hero who took down the one and only rat inside the police department. And he goes on record to recommend William for the Medal of Merit for doing a fine job undercover. You cocksucker. They have a funeral for Silly Willie, and I'm 99.9% sure that this lady's fetus is half his, and not this cocksucker's. Doesn't matter, because she ignores him when he asks her about the baby. So finally, this rat bastard got away with multiple lies and crimes, but at least he got what was coming for him. Sergeant Dignam.
Okay.
He blows his brains out and leaves. That's what I call justice. By the way, I was actually in this movie. Yes, just a small little cameo before I started YouTube. In a nutshell, this film is infested with rats, and someone needs to call an exterminator.
Baby, you